The vast emptiness of space stretched endlessly before the research vessel Starseeker as it glided through the darkness near the galactic core. The ship's sensors beat steadily, scanning the surrounding area for anything of interest. On the bridge, Dr. James Miller stared out the massive viewport, his weathered face reflecting in the reinforced glass. "Captain, we're picking up something unusual," announced Robert, the sensor operator. His blue fingers moved quickly across the control panel. Like most members of the Blue Veil species, he took pride in his technical abilities. The ship's captain, a tall being named Grell, walked over to examine the readings. "What kind of unusual?" "Metal. Lots of it. And it's old." "Very old," Robert replied, his antenna twitching with excitement. Dr. Miller moved closer to the sensor station, his interest piqued. As the only human aboard a ship full of alien archaeologists, he had learned to trust his instincts. Something about these readings felt different from their usual discoveries. "Can we get a visual?" Miller asked, trying to keep his voice casual despite his growing excitement. The main screen flickered to life, and everyone on the bridge fell silent. Floating in the darkness was not just one ship, but hundreds, maybe thousands, of massive vessels stretched out as far as their sensors could detect. The fleet hung motionless, like forgotten toys in space. "This is impossible," whispered Grell, his scales changing color from green to pale yellow in shock. "The size of this fleet. It must be at least 50,000 years old, but the preservation is remarkable." Miller felt his heart racing. The ships were enormous, easily dwarfing their research vessel. Their design was unlike anything he had ever seen, yet something about them tugged at his memory, like a half-forgotten dream. The discovery quickly caught the attention of the Galactic Council. Within days, the area was swarming with research vessels and survey teams from dozens of species. The Starseeker's crew had the honor of being the first to dock with one of the ancient ships. As Miller floated through the dark corridors in his spacesuit, his helmet lights illuminated walls covered in strange markings. Behind him, Professor Xan, a respected archaeologist from the Council's leading species, the Arcturians, made dismissive noises through the comm system. "Look at this primitive construction," Xan said, his voice dripping with contempt. "Whoever built these ships clearly hadn't mastered proper energy-matter manipulation. They actually used physical corridors and manual doors." Miller bit his tongue. He had learned long ago that arguing with an Arcturian was pointless. Instead, he focused on documenting everything he saw. The design might seem primitive to Xan, but Miller noticed something else. Everything was built with backup systems, redundancies, and practical solutions. This wasn't primitive. It was purposeful. These builders were foolish. Xan continued, running his scanner over a sealed doorway. No quantum encryption, no neural interfaces, not even basic consciousness integration. How did they expect to maintain a fleet of this size? But Miller had stopped listening. His light had fallen on something that made his blood run cold. There, partially hidden under centuries of space dust, was a marking that looked eerily familiar. He carefully wiped away the grime, his hands shaking slightly. The symbol was worn but still visible, a simple circle with straight lines radiating from it, like a child's drawing of the sun. But it wasn't just any sun symbol. Miller had seen its exact match in Earth's oldest archaeological sites. "Dr. Miller," Robert's voice crackled through his comm. "The initial dating results are in. These ships are exactly 51,843 years old." Miller stared at the symbol, his mind racing. That date lined up perfectly with the great gap in human history, the mysterious period before recorded civilization, when all traces of human activity seemed to vanish. "Thank you, Robert," he replied calmly, while his heart pounded in his chest. He looked around the corridor with new eyes. Could it be possible? Had humanity achieved space flight tens of thousands of years ago, only to lose it all and start over? As the other researchers continued their survey, laughing at the primitive design, Miller kept his thoughts to himself. He had a feeling this discovery was going to change everything. Not just what they knew about the past, but what everyone thought about humanity's place in the galaxy. He just needed to prove it. The next few days aboard the ancient fleet turned into a frenzy of research activity. Dr. Miller worked tirelessly, moving from ship to ship while carefully documenting everything he found. His friend Tom Reed, another human researcher who had joined from a different vessel, helped him collect data while the rest of the alien scientists continued to mock the fleet's design. "Look at this, James," Tom called out, his flashlight beam highlighting a section of wall in what they believed was the ship's main control room. "These patterns keep repeating everywhere we look." Miller floated over in the zero gravity, his boots magnetizing to the floor as he reached his colleague. The walls were covered in geometric designs that at first glance looked purely decorative. But Miller had spent 30 years studying ancient Earth patterns, and these weren't random. "They're not just designs," Miller muttered, running his hand over the cold metal. "They're mathematics. Look at the spacing. It's all based on prime numbers." Nearby, Professor Ktan let out a loud snort. "Mathematics? Please. These are clearly primitive attempts at art. No advanced civilization would waste space on such basic patterns." But Miller wasn't listening. He was too busy taking photographs and measurements. The patterns matched those found in humanity's oldest ruins, the ones that predated known civilization. Patterns that archaeologists had argued about for centuries. "Tom, help me with something," Miller said quietly, making sure the alien researchers were out of earshot. "Does this look familiar to you?" He pointed to a series of interconnected hexagons. Tom's eyes widened behind his helmet visor. That's the same pattern from the underwater ruins off the coast of Japan. But that's impossible. Those ruins are only 12,000 years old." "Unless they were copying something older," Miller suggested. "Something they remembered but didn't fully understand anymore." Their discussion was interrupted by Robert's excited voice over the comm system. "Everyone, we've managed to power up one of the computer terminals. It's in Research Lab 4. The team rushed to the location, their magnetic boots clanking against the metal floors. The terminal glowed with a soft blue light, displaying symbols that scrolled across its screen. Professor Xan pushed his way to the front. "Finally, now we can see how truly primitive their data storage systems were." He connected his advanced translator device to the terminal, confident it would easily decode the ancient language. Nothing happened. Xan frowned and tried again. Still nothing. Other alien scientists attempted to interface with the system, each failing in turn. Their advanced quantum computers couldn't make sense of the code. "This is absurd," Xan complained. "Even the most basic computer systems should be readable. Unless—" He paused dramatically. "Unless they were so primitive they didn't even use proper quantum encoding." Miller stepped forward, something nagging at his mind. The symbols weren't random. They appeared in groups of 8, just like. "It's binary code," he said suddenly. "The most basic form of computer language. Ones and zeros." The alien scientists laughed. "Binary," one of them scoffed. "That's not even a proper computing language. No advanced civilization would use something so simple." But Miller was already pulling out his old tablet computer. Unlike the aliens' quantum devices, it could be programmed to read basic binary. His fingers flew over the screen as he worked to establish a connection. The terminal beeped, and suddenly the symbols changed. They began arranging themselves into clear, readable text. The aliens fell silent as Miller's tablet translated the ancient words. "System boot sequence initiated. Warning. Primary power at 0.03%. Backup systems engage. Please enter authorization code." "How did you do that?" Xan demanded, his pride clearly wounded. "Sometimes the simplest solution is the best one," Miller replied, trying to hide his excitement. The language structure, the coding style, it was all hauntingly familiar, like reading an old Earth computer manual. Tom moved closer to Miller, speaking softly. "James, are you thinking what I'm thinking? Could humans have actually built this?" Miller nodded slowly. "The evidence is starting to point that way. But we need more proof. And if we're right..." He glanced at the alien scientists, who were still trying to make sense of the primitive computer system. "If we're right, we're about to rewrite galactic history." As if in response, the terminal beeped again, and new words appeared. "Voice authentication required. Please state command in primary operator language." Miller and Tom exchanged meaningful looks. They both knew what they had to try next. The question was, would the system respond to human speech? The discovery of the bridge section changed everything. While most of the alien research teams focused on the engine rooms and weapons systems, Dr. Miller and Tom had followed their hunch, using the old ship schematics to locate what they believed was the command center of the largest vessel. "The doors sealed tight," Tom said, examining the massive metal barrier before them. Unlike the automated doors elsewhere on the ship, this one was completely mechanical, with a large wheel in its center. Miller smiled, running his gloved hand over the wheel. "Exactly. No power needed. They built it to last, to be opened even if all systems failed." He gripped the wheel and tried to turn it. It didn't budge. "Let me help," Tom offered. Together, they strained against the wheel. Slowly, with a groan of ancient metal, it began to turn. The sound echoed through the empty corridors like a ghost from the past. The door swung open with a hiss of escaping air, revealing a large, circular room. Their helmet lights cut through the darkness, illuminating rows of control stations arranged in concentric circles around a central command chair. "This is incredible," Tom whispered, his light beam dancing across the various panels and screens. "Everything's laid out so logically, so human-like in its design." Miller moved towards the command chair, his heart pounding. Something was different about this room. While the rest of the ship showed signs of evacuation, this place felt more lived in. Personal items still sat at some of the stations, preserved in the airless environment. "Tom," he called out suddenly, "look at this." Sitting on a side console was what appeared to be a cup. Not just any cup, a mug. Miller carefully picked it up, treating it like the priceless artifact it was. Decades of space dust had settled on its surface. With trembling hands, he wiped the dust away. The material was ceramic, manufactured to an incredibly high standard to have survived this long. But it was what was printed on the side that made his breath catch. "What does it say?" Tom asked, floating closer. Before Miller could answer, Professor Xan entered the bridge with several other alien researchers. "Ah, more primitive design elements," he declared, looking around dismissively. "Manual controls everywhere. They didn't even have neural interfaces." Miller barely heard him. He was too focused on the faded text on the mug. Though worn by time, the letters were unmistakably English. "World's best captain," with what looked like a date below it. 2. The rest was too worn to read. "Professor," one of the alien scientists called out, "we found something in the computer core. It appears to be some kind of emergency protocol." They gathered around a terminal where Robert was working. Unlike the others, this one had activated as soon as they entered the room, displaying lines of text that scrolled past too quickly to read. "The language structure is bizarre," Robert said, his blue fingers flying over his translation device. "It's not matching any known galactic language patterns." Miller stepped forward, still clutching the mug. "May I?" he asked, pulling out his tablet. The alien stepped aside, confident that his primitive device would be useless. He connected to the terminal, and suddenly the scrolling text stabilized. Miller's eyes widened as he read. "Emergency Protocol 7. In case of complete power failure, manual override can be activated through voice command. Authorized personnel only. Please speak command in English, Mandarin, or Hindi." "That's impossible," Xan declared, reading the translation. "Those are dead languages from..." He stopped, his scales turning pale as realization struck. From Earth, Miller finished quietly. He looked at the mug in his hands, then at the command chair, and finally at the stunned faces of his alien colleagues. This isn't just an ancient alien fleet. This is our fleet. Humanity's fleet. Tom picked up another object from a nearby station, a small metal plate with more faded text. James, look at this manufacturing stamp. The metal. It's an earth alloy. Steel. The alien scientists began chattering among themselves, their previous mockery forgotten in the face of this revelation. Miller stood in the center of the bridge, looking at all the primitive design elements with new eyes. Every choice, every system, every backup, it all made perfect sense now. These weren't the remnants of some long-dead alien civilization. They were standing in humanity's forgotten legacy, preserved in the void of space for over 50,000 years. And Miller had a feeling they were just scratching the surface of what their ancestors had left behind. No one expected it to happen. After nearly a week of careful research aboard the ancient fleet, the entire archaeological team was going about their usual tasks when everything changed. Miller was examining markings near what appeared to be a main reactor core when the first vibration shook the ship. At first it was so subtle he thought he had imagined it. Then the deck plates beneath his magnetic boots began to hum. Is anyone else feeling that? Tom's voice crackled over the comm system. Before anyone could respond, the emergency lights along the corridors suddenly flickered to life. A deep thrumming sound began to build throughout the massive vessel, like a giant taking its first breath after a long sleep. Everyone, remain calm, Captain Grell ordered over the general channel. All teams, report status immediately. Professor Xan's voice cut through the chatter. This is impossible. The power systems are activating across the entire fleet, but there's no energy source capable of. His words were drowned out by a loud hum as more systems began coming online. Panels that had been dark for millennia now glowed with soft blue light. The artificial gravity suddenly engaged, causing several floating researchers to drop to the deck with surprised yells. All teams, evacuate immediately. Grell commanded. We don't know if these systems are stable after 50,000 years. But Miller stood his ground, watching in amazement as the ancient ship came to life around him. The air recyclers kicked in with a whoosh, and atmospheric readings on his suit display showed the corridors were being repressurized. James, you need to see this, Tom called out excitedly. The main bridge. All the systems are activating. Miller rushed to the bridge, arriving just as the main view screen flickered to life. Symbols and text began scrolling across it. But unlike before, they were moving with purpose, forming patterns that looked increasingly familiar. It's running a full system diagnostic, he realized aloud. The ship is repairing itself. Professor Xan and several other alien scientists burst onto the bridge, their arguments dying on their lips as they watched the ancient technology awakening. The ship's computer system was now speaking in a clear, synthesized voice. Initial power restoration complete. Beginning automated repair sequence. Detecting neural patterns of authorized species. The alien researchers rushed to their equipment, trying to interface with the awakening systems, but just like before, their advanced technology was useless. Neural patterns detected, the computer announced. Confirming. Human presence identified. Initiating primary startup sequence. The bridge erupted in chaos. Human. San sputtered. That's absurd. These ships are 50,000 years old. Humans were still living in caves then. But Miller wasn't listening. He stepped forward, removed his helmet in the now breathable atmosphere, and spoke clearly. Computer, run full system diagnostic. The response was immediate. Screens came alive all around the bridge, displaying detailed information about every system on the ship. More importantly, it was all in perfect, modern English. How are you doing this? Robert asked, his blue skin pale with shock. Because the computer was designed to recognize human neural patterns, Miller explained, his voice filled with wonder. Our brains haven't changed that much in 50,000 years. We're still the same species that built these ships." As if to confirm his words, more systems began activating throughout the fleet. Each vessel's computer system came online, all responding to the presence of human brain patterns. The ships began running repair protocols, ancient machinery humming to life after millennia of silence. "Sir," one of the junior researchers called out in panic, "the weapons systems are activating." But Miller smiled, understanding dawning on him. "No, not weapons. Defense systems. Look at the configuration. They're creating a protective shield around the fleet." The main screen showed a massive energy field forming, connecting all the ships in a complex web of power. It wasn't aggressive. It was protective, like a parent wrapping a blanket around a child. "This fleet wasn't abandoned," Miller said softly, watching the ancient ships awakening one by one. "It was waiting for us to find it again, to be ready for it." Professor Tan stared at the displays, his earlier mockery forgotten. "All this time, we thought we were studying remnants of a dead civilization. Instead," Tom finished, "we were looking at humanity's first steps into the stars. And now it's waking up to help us take the next ones." The fleet continued its awakening, each system coming online with perfect precision, responding to the presence of its creator's descendants. The galaxy was about to learn that humanity's history was far grander than anyone had imagined, and they were just getting started. News of the fleet's awakening spread through the galaxy like wildfire. Within hours, the Galactic Council's entire leadership had assembled in an emergency session, watching live feeds from the archaeological team with a mixture of disbelief and growing concern. On the bridge of the ancient flagship, Dr. Miller stood before the main computer terminal, his heart racing as historical records began flooding the screens. The ship's AI had begun sharing its database, revealing a history of humanity that no one had ever imagined. Playing historical record. Final message from Fleet Admiral David Thompson, year 2163 of the First Age. The computer announced. A hologram flickered to life in the center of the bridge. The image showed an older man in a uniform that seemed both alien and familiar. His face was tired but determined as he began to speak. "To those who find this fleet, if you are human, you are our children's children, and this is your inheritance. If you are not, know that humanity chose this path willingly." The alien researchers fell silent, even Professor Tan stopping his usual commentary as the message continued. "We achieved the stars earlier than any species should have," the Admiral's hologram explained. "We built this fleet when Earth was young, when most of our people still lived in simple villages, but we knew the price of advancing too quickly." Miller watched, transfixed, as images appeared showing Earth's ancient past, but not as they knew it. Great cities of advanced technology stood alongside primitive settlements. Spaceships launched while most humans still traveled by foot. "We saw other young civilizations destroy themselves with technology they weren't ready for," the Admiral continued. "We couldn't let that happen to humanity. So we made the hardest choice in our history. We chose to forget." Tom gasped as the next images showed the deliberate dismantling of Earth's advanced technology. The great cities were carefully demolished, the knowledge sealed away in hidden vaults, and the fleet sent to wait in the darkest reaches of space. "We used targeted biological agents to reset our technological development," the hologram explained. "Our people would start fresh, advance naturally, learn the hard lessons that every species must learn. But we left ourselves insurance. This fleet, these ships, programmed to recognize our descendants when they were finally ready." Professor Xan stepped forward, his scales shifting colors rapidly. "That's why we couldn't interface with the systems," he realized aloud. "They weren't primitive at all. They were specifically designed to respond only to human neural patterns." More records began playing automatically, showing the true scope of humanity's first civilization. They hadn't just achieved spaceflight. They had mastered it. The fleet contained technology that was still advanced by modern galactic standards. All those ancient ruins on Earth, Miller said quietly, "The mysterious structures we could never explain, the mathematical knowledge that seemed to appear out of nowhere, they weren't the beginning of our civilization. They were the remnants of what we chose to forget." The main screen displayed a map of the galaxy, showing hundreds of points of light. Additional human facilities detected. The computer announced, "Would you like to activate the network?" Before Miller could respond, his tablet chimed with an urgent message. The Galactic Council was demanding immediate answers. The news was spreading, and the galaxy's power structure was already shifting. "The Council species," Tom said, reading the message, "they're not just surprised, they're scared. All this time, they thought they were dealing with newcomers to space. Instead," Miller finished, "they've been dismissing the species that taught itself space flight twice." He turned to Professor Xan. "Still think our design principles are primitive?" Xan shook his head slowly. "We thought you achieved in centuries what took other species millennia because you were reckless. Now we know. You did it because you'd done it before." The Admiral's hologram spoke one final time. "To our descendants, we left you these ships not as weapons, but as guardians. Use them wisely. And to the galaxy at large, remember this: humanity's greatest strength isn't our technology or our knowledge. It's our ability to start over, to learn, to grow, and to rise again." Miller looked around the bridge at the awakened systems, the revealed history, and the shocked faces of his alien colleagues. Humanity's true place in the galaxy was finally known, and nothing would ever be the same. The real question now was, what would they do with this legacy? The fleet's central computer chamber was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. Dr. Miller stood before a massive holographic display, watching as the ancient ships revealed their true purpose, while representatives from every major galactic species looked on in stunned silence. Initiating full capabilities demonstration, the computer announced. Its voice was calm and clear, speaking perfect English. "Warning: some displays may be disturbing to non-military personnel." The hologram shifted to show a massive creature, easily the size of a small moon, moving through deep space. Miller recognized it immediately from ancient Earth legends, the planet eaters, cosmic horrors that devoured whole worlds. Threat-level Omega entities detected by first-age humanity. 47. The computer continued. Successful neutralizations. 47. 0 civilian casualties. Professor Xan stepped forward, his earlier arrogance completely gone. "That's impossible. Nothing can stop a cosmic devourer. We lost 3 systems to just one of them last year." In response, the hologram showed one of the fleet's ships engaging a planet eater. A beam of pure white energy lanced out, and the monster simply ceased to exist. No explosion, no debris. It was simply gone, erased from reality itself. "Quantum deletion technology," the computer explained, "capable of removing threats from all possible timelines simultaneously." Tom whistled low. Our ancestors didn't just build warships. They created guardians for the entire galaxy. The display changed again, showing various defense systems. Shields that could absorb the energy of a dying sun. Weapons that could stop time itself. Medical bays that could cure any disease or injury. "But why?" asked Robert, his blue skin pale with awe. "Why build all this and then choose to forget?" Miller touched the console, bringing up Admiral Thompson's personal logs. "Because they understood something we're only learning now. True power isn't about having the strongest weapons or the most advanced technology. It's about knowing when not to use them." The computer began highlighting specific systems throughout the fleet. Primary function: protection of developing civilizations. Secondary function: prevention of extinction-level events. Tertiary function: preservation of galactic peace. The Galactic Council's representatives huddled together, whispering urgently. Their entire power structure was built on technological superiority. Now they faced the reality that humanity had voluntarily given up technologies they still couldn't match. Full system capabilities now accessible to authorized human users, the computer announced. Dr. James Miller recognized as current fleet commander based on neural pattern compatibility. Miller felt the weight of history settling on his shoulders. Computer, show us the threat assessment for the current galaxy. The hologram transformed into a map of known space, with dozens of red dots pulsing ominously. Multiple level Omega threats detected. 17 planet eaters in dormant state. 3 gamma-ray burst weapons prepared by hostile entities. 1 artificial intelligence collective planning galaxy-wide extinction event. The alien representatives gasped. They hadn't known about any of these threats. Their best detection systems hadn't spotted them. The fleet's been monitoring everything, Tom realized. For 50,000 years, it's been watching, waiting, ready to protect everyone if needed. Professor Xan approached Miller, his scales now a humble shade of gray. When we first found these ships, we laughed at their primitive design. We mocked their backup systems and mechanical controls. But now I understand. Everything was built this way so it would last, so it would be ready when it was truly needed. Miller nodded, watching as more systems came online across the fleet. Our ancestors knew that sometimes the simplest solutions are the most reliable. They built these ships not to show off their power, but to protect all life in the galaxy. The computer interrupted with a new announcement. Detection systems indicate hostile AI collective has noticed fleet reactivation. They have begun moving toward populated systems, threat level, maximum, awaiting command authorization. All eyes turned to Miller. In that moment, he truly understood why their ancestors had left this legacy, not for power or glory, but for moments like this, when someone needed to stand between life and extinction. Computer, he said clearly, initiate defense protocol. Priority 1. Protect all civilian life. The ancient fleet hummed with power, systems that had slept for 50 millennia awakening to their purpose once again. Humanity's first great achievement was about to become its latest triumph. And this time, no one was laughing. 3 months after the awakening of the ancient fleet, the galaxy had changed beyond recognition. The massive command center of Earth's new space station buzzed with activity as representatives from hundreds of species worked together under humanity's guidance. Dr. Miller stood at the main observation window, watching as ships from the ancient fleet patrolled alongside modern vessels. The integration of old and new technology had been surprisingly smooth once everyone had gotten past their initial shock and pride. Latest report from the Centauri sector, Tom said, walking up with a datapad. The last of the dormant planet eaters has been neutralized. No casualties, no collateral damage. Miller nodded, remembering how differently things had gone just a year ago, when the Council species had tried to fight one of these creatures. They had lost 3 inhabited worlds in that battle. The ancient fleet had dealt with 17 of them in less than a month, without losing a single life. Dr. Miller, Robert called out excitedly, his blue skin almost glowing. The deep space sensors are picking up something. You need to see this. The main screen lit up, showing what appeared to be another massive fleet, hidden in the space between galaxies. The design was instantly recognizable, more human ships from the first age. Computer, analyze and confirm, Miller ordered. Analysis complete, the familiar AI voice responded. Confirmed. Second Guardian fleet detected. Purpose, Intergalactic Defense Network. Status, awaiting activation. Professor Xan, who had become one of humanity's strongest supporters, stepped forward in amazement. Your ancestors, they didn't just protect our galaxy. They created a defense network for the entire local group of galaxies. The Council representatives, once so dismissive of humanity, now waited eagerly for Miller's response. In 3 short months, the power dynamic had shifted completely. Not through force or politics, but through humanity's demonstrated wisdom and protective nature. We've detected similar fleets in 12 locations now, Tom explained to the gathered aliens. Each one designed to protect different regions of space. Our ancestors created a safety net for all life, not just their own. A young alien scientist raised her hand. But why are they showing themselves now? Miller smiled. Because we're ready. Not just humans, but all of us. The fleet's sensors detected how we worked together to face the AI threat. We proved we could handle the responsibility. The main screen shifted to show the AI collective that had threatened all life. The ancient fleet hadn't destroyed them. Instead, it had contained them, created a space where they could exist without harming others. It was exactly what humanity's ancestors would have wanted. The latest analysis of the ship's database is even more amazing, Tom added. They didn't just leave us technology. They left us knowledge about hundreds of extinct civilizations, preserved cultures, saved languages. They were historians as well as guardians. Professor Xan stepped forward, addressing the chamber. When we first found these ships, we thought they were relics. We mocked their design, their backup systems, their primitive solutions. We were wrong. Every choice they made was deliberate, designed to last through the ages, to be there when needed. Miller touched a control panel, bringing up images of the fleet's construction. Our ancestors understood something it took us 50,000 years to learn again. True advancement isn't about having the most powerful weapons or the most impressive technology. It's about how you use what you have to help others. The chamber erupted in applause as more sensor data came in, showing yet another hidden fleet awakening. Humanity's legacy wasn't just a few thousand ships. It was a network of guardians spanning multiple galaxies, all designed to protect and preserve life in all its forms. So what happens now? Asked one of the council members. Miller looked out at the assembled representatives of countless worlds. Now we do what our ancestors did. We learn, we grow, and we protect. But this time, we do it together. As if in response, the ancient ships outside the window lit up, their energy fields creating beautiful patterns against the backdrop of space. They were no longer just humanity's legacy. They were a gift to all life, everywhere. And somewhere, Miller thought, the ancient fleet's first crew must be smiling, knowing their greatest achievement wasn't the technology they created, but the unity it would one day inspire. The galaxy had stopped laughing at the ancient fleet. Instead, they had learned to stand beside it, as guardians of all that lived and all that would ever be.